In this video, we're going to talk about the BMW iX3 versus the BYD Atto 3, two great SUV electric vehicles that I drove recently. I like them both for different reasons. There are some things about each of these cars that I don't like, and we're going to go through everything in this video so that if you're considering buying either of these two cars, you're not sure which one might be more suitable for you, well, we're going to talk about it right now. Okay, before we get started, a little disclaimer. These are just my opinions. Your opinion might and probably is going to be quite different, and I'm just going to be scoring things based on some made-up criteria that I think is relevant, but maybe you disagree with me. If you do disagree, let me know in the comments below. All right, so let's begin. Oh, one other thing before we get started as well, right? I've got thousands of kilometers experience driving the BYD Atto 3, whereas I've only got 265-ish kilometers experience in the BMW iX3. So much less experience in the BMW compared to the BYD. That's one thing. Another difference that I should mention is a lot of my time driving the BYD was actually on the freeway, on the highway, at the speed limit, 100, 110 kilometers per hour. Whereas my time driving the BMW was mostly in the city, slow speeds, lots of stopping and starting. So quite a different situation in terms of my driving experience. Nonetheless, here's what I think about each of these cars. Okay, let's start with suspension and the way it feels to drive the cars. Well, I've got to say, the BYD Atto 3 is a really soft ride. It feels like you're floating on a cloud, like you're the captain of a big old boat or a big old bus or something like that. So if you're looking for a soft ride, the BYD wins. However, if you want a firmer ride, firmer suspension, you're going to want to go with the BMW because it is just much firmer than the BYD. So depending on what you prefer, softer, BYD, firmer, the BMW. In terms of how luxurious the cars feel, in my opinion, the BMW is the clear winner. It just looks and feels more luxurious. It's more expensive, that's obvious. I think the BYD is a great car, but in terms of luxury, straight luxury, I'm sorry, it just doesn't touch the BMW, in my opinion. All right, let's talk about air conditioning. And again, in my opinion, I think the BMW wins. It was the most effective, it was the easiest to use, the most intuitive. The BYD was pretty good as well, but not as good as the BMW. I should mention as well, I drove both of these vehicles in summer, in the Australian heat. And obviously I was looking for cold air conditioning. So I can't comment on the effectiveness of heating in colder months or colder climates. If you've got any comments about that, drop them in the comments so we can all see what you think. In terms of cruise control, I like both cars for different reasons. I like the BMW because it gives you really nice, fine control of your target speed. You can control your target speed very precisely in 1 kilometer per hour increments up and down, and it's intuitive. It's easy to use. So I really, really like that. I also like on the BMW when you set the cruise control to give you the most distance between you and the car in front. It does give you a really comfortable distance and it feels quite safe. So that's another thing I like. One thing I didn't like about the BMW though is when you're going around a corner or going around a roundabout, I found that the cruise control would sometimes tend to accelerate around the roundabout or accelerate around the corner. And I found that quite unnerving, and that was something that caught my attention that I didn't like. For the adaptive cruise control on the BYD Atto 3, I also like it. It's a little bit different. I do find it to be intuitive, easy to use. I like the fact when you turn it on, it kicks in at your target speed, your current speed, and then you can bump the target speed up or down by 5 kilometer per hour increments quite easily. So that's good. I find that the distance between you and the car in front, when you're trying to have the most distance, it's a little bit closer than on the BMW. So, if you're looking to feel as far away from the car that you're following as possible, maybe it's not as good as the BMW, in my opinion. Something else that I didn't really love about the BYD is it doesn't seem like it's the best in terms of detecting cars that might be stopped in the distance ahead of you. Like, for example, let's say you're driving at 70 kilometers per hour. There are no cars immediately in front of you, but in the distance, there's a red light and there are some cars stopped there. And as you approach those cars that are stopped, I found that the BYD kind of didn't really detect them until quite late. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on the situation and ready to apply manual braking if I need to. So that's something that I found a little bit unsettling. Something else about the BYD that I didn't love is that when you are stationary, completely stopped at the traffic lights, when the lights eventually go green and cars start moving again, the car doesn't start moving automatically. You do have to get it going yourself. It's no big deal, but hey, if we're really splitting hairs and being pedantic, that is something that I prefer on the BMW versus the BYD. All right, here's a point where the BYD wins, and that's turning performance or turning radius. Now, this might be about the wheelbase, the dimensions of the vehicle, but if you're trying to make a tight turn, I found the BYD Atto 3 to outperform the BMW. So that's something to keep in mind. If maybe you have a tight parking spot at home or at your workplace, if you're going to be trying to navigate in a tight car park, maybe you're looking for better turning performance. And in that case, that's a vote for the BYD. Here's another point where the BYD wins, in my opinion, and that's the navigation system. I find the BYD navigation system to be a lot more intuitive, a lot easier to use than the BMW. I'm not saying the BYD is the best that I've ever used, but hey, it does work. It's pretty easy to use and it'll get the job done. On the other hand, the BMW, and look, this might just be because I don't have enough time in the car, I don't have enough experience, I didn't play around with all of the settings, all of the possible options, but I found the BMW navigational system to be just, what is this? I couldn't figure it. It took me ages to figure out how to get the navigation system to going even to the suburb, even to the area that I wanted to go to. So that wasn't intuitive at all, in my opinion. If I'm wrong about that, let me know. But hey, honestly, I found it difficult to use. In terms of dynamics and driving settings, I think the BMW edges out the BYD in this case. The BYD, look, it might have some settings hidden away somewhere. If it does, I didn't find them, or maybe I'm not familiar with them. And I should mention for both vehicles and for all EVs, these types of settings are software upgrades that might come along or get improvements at some point in the future. So just because either car might be the best or the worst at this point in time, that doesn't mean that in the future it's not going to improve, and I'm sure it will as both brands roll out patches and improvements. All right, this is a bit of a funny one. I previously mentioned already that my experience driving both cars was in summer. It was during the hot months. And look, I'm getting on. I'm, starting to lose my hair a little bit. And I was getting a sunburnt head driving these cars. But I've got to say, if you shave your head or if you're completely bald, maybe, and if you are in a hot place like Australia in summertime, then the BYD Atto 3 is probably better in terms of not getting a sunburnt head. In the iX3, I just found that I was a bit more exposed and it was difficult to hide from the sun. So maybe you need to wear a hat. I don't know, that is what it is, but I found that the BYD Atto 3 did offer a bit more protection from the sun in those hotter months. In terms of range and range anxiety, I only really want to talk about the BYD here. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned earlier, my experience driving the BYD was mostly on highways and freeways driving at 100, 110 kilometers per hour. Longer drives, whereas my time in the BMW was mostly around town, around the city, lots of stopping and starting. So very, very different experience in terms of my driving there. And yeah, look, not much experience overall in the BMW. So I don't feel like I'm qualified to talk about the range performance of the BMW, but I do feel like I can talk about it for the BYD. So here's what I will say. In the BYD, if it's telling you on a full charge that you can drive 470 kilometers, don't believe it. You need to heavily discount that range guidance because it's way overly optimistic, at least on highways. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about driving around the city. When you get the regen braking, you might get better performance. Okay, fair enough. But I can tell you for sure, at least in my experience, driving on a freeway, 110 kilometers per hour, you're just not going to get anything near the advertised range. So for example, if it's telling you can get 470 kilometers range, I would be planning to stop somewhere about halfway, like 235 kilometers. And definitely I would have anxiety trying to drive more than about 300 kilometers. I'd be definitely trying to plan a stop somewhere around 250 to 300. And look, I would be absolutely shocked if you told me that you really did get 470 kilometers from a full charge, because I just am yet to see it. I don't believe it. If it's possible, let me know, but I don't believe it. So what I'm saying is, whatever the range guidance is telling you, I think you should apply a factor of about 0.6 to 0.65 and plan for a stop around there. Otherwise, you might end up short of your destination and really embarrassed. All right, let's talk about how pleasurable both cars are to drive, because hey, that's a lot of the experience, right? It's like, how does this feel? Is this fun to drive? Am I enjoying it? In my opinion, the BMW wins. It is just such a pleasure to drive. And if you're a BMW person looking for an EV, this might be your car, because wow, I was a little bit reluctant to get into it. It took me a few hours to get the hang of it. Definitely the navigational system, that center console, I don't find it intuitive. But in terms of just driving the car manually, wow, it is a pleasure to drive. Not to say that the BYD is not a pleasure, but hey, in my opinion, in my experience, the BMW is the winner there. which leads us into value for money and price. Look, let's leave price alone because we know that the BMW is more expensive. That's obvious. But in terms of value for money, that's an interesting question. I think if money was no object and you're just looking for the best value, I don't know. Really, it depends on, it's up to you. But for most people, money is going to be an important consideration. And I would say probably just go for the BYD in terms of straight value for money. The BYD, it's a great EV, in my opinion. You're going to get 80 to 90% of what you're going to get from the BMW, in my opinion. Okay, sure, it doesn't have all of the bells and whistles. It's not as luxurious. It doesn't have the BMW badge, but it's a nice EV. It's going to get the job done. It's in the same class. It's an SUV. So if you're looking for value for money, I'd say probably go for the BYD. If money is no object, and if you said to me right now, like, hey, you can drive away with one of these two cars free of charge, I'm taking the BMW for sure. So these are just my opinions. Your opinion and your criteria might be very different. If you do have a different opinion, let me know what I got wrong. Let me know what you think about either of these two vehicles. If you're thinking about buying one, let us know which one you actually buy. And yeah, hope this was helpful. Oh, by the way, if you want to get my notes about both of these cars and other EVs that I've driven, click on the first link below in the video description and I'll send everything that I've got right to you.